Hey, it's David Levin, and we are here with another exciting episode of Pop Goes the Culture. And this one is really special for you today because we got a ton of people here with us. They're working on a Kickstarter. And if you're watching this after the Kickstarter, well, tough. But right now, there's a Kickstarter going on for Robot Monster in 3D. It is so crazy that if you don't know about this stuff, we will educate you on this stuff. But with us and acknowledge each other when I call your name. First off, we have Paul Castiglia, a guy who I've known for quite some time, who has worked for Archie and many other comic book companies. We've got Greg Johnny Moffett, who was actually in the original 1950s science fiction classic Robot Monster.
That's correct.
He played the little boy, and he hasn't changed a bit in 70 years.
Okay.
Let's see who else do we have.
Your eyesight has changed, but
my eyesight is my eyesight has definitely changed quite a bit. Comics historian Carl Scheckel, who is helping out with this amazing project, and we got Bob Furmanek. We have a very illustrious group here. More people will be joining us a little bit later. When I heard about this project, I was thrilled and confused. So I'm going to let Paul explain it because I am a fan of both comic books and of cheesy 1950s science fiction movies. And certainly,
hey.
I'm sorry, illustrious 50s science fiction movies. And this one certainly is iconic in a million different ways. So Paul, give us a little background, and then we'll go person by person.
Well, okay. Well, the background really starts with Bob down there. Well, on my screen right now, he's below me, so it's kind of a Brady Bunch thing happening. But Bob Furmanek of the 3D Film Archive and his team made a brilliant 70th anniversary restoration of the film Robot Monster in 3D using 35 millimeter elements. Bob can explain more about that, but it is just incredible. It's never looked better. It is the most masterful you'll ever see it. And there's a lot of, garbage prints out there in the world because it's a public domain film, but the restoration is Bob's, and it's brilliant. And, Bob was taking the film around to different theaters, screening it over the summer because it had been released. A company called Bayview Entertainment put it out on Blu-ray and DVD, and also was helping to get some bookings for theatrical screenings. And Bob was out there with his team. They were doing Q&A. And Bob comes up to me one day, and I think it went something like this. It's like, I was talking to so-and-so, probably Jack Theakston, and he pointed out how that opening title, it's surrounded by comic books, vintage 1950s comic books. I said, yeah, it makes sense because it's kind of this crazy science fiction story that you would have seen in an old EC comic or even a 1950s Superman or Batman,
right.
Where we're getting involved with space creatures and things like that. So Bob said, what if we did a comic of this? And he goes, and you're the guy to do it. Bob, I've known Bob for a few years too. And Bob and I go back when I was working for Mattel Toys. Bob and I got involved with getting the rights from Mattel for Viewmaster, classic vintage original Viewmaster stereoscopic reels that he can include on his 3D rarities project. So he already knew my background with comics and toys and animation and all that. And he said, I would love for you to helm this. And then from there, it just exploded. Who can I get? Who could write something? Who could draw something? Who's good for this? Who could do funny stuff? Who could do dramatic stuff? And it just snowballed. But
so I want to nonlinear this for a minute, Paul, because I want to go back and give some exposition before we get into what you're doing now, because we need to cover first. I mean, look, the folks who are sitting here know Robot Monster. But for the folks who are sitting at home, we need to give them an education on Robot Monster and what it is and how it came to be. I think, Greg, perhaps you can sort of walk us through Robot Monster. What is Robot Monster? And I'd love to hear some of your personal reminiscence about that movie?
To begin with, it's a fantasy dream that a little boy has. Although unless you're paying very close attention, it's very difficult to tell that after about the first 10 minutes you're in a dream. Only if you notice the change in everybody's costumes at that exact moment would you realize that something serious changed. But at the end of the film, of course, Roman chases and kills me, and then Great Guidance kills Roman, and then we all wake up in front of the cave and go off into the sunset happy. Except that 30 seconds later, Roman comes out of the cave. Now he hasn't yet conquered the world, but and the rest of us are still alive. George, me, Paula, all the rest of the cast that he managed to kill off are really still alive. So the comic book, I think I suggested early on that it come from that point of view, realizing that everybody was really still alive, and maybe the conflicts could come in the future with Roman and the various characters as they aged. I don't know how that's gone. What I know about your work, you could put in a thimble for a midget. But well, I was a 10-year-old actor. You know, it took 4 days to shoot the film. There might have been 2 retakes in the entire 4 days. It was a very limited budget, as I understand, about $16,000 to fund the entire film.
Wow.
It was done in a pretty good 3D technique from everything I read, but so few theaters were outfitted to show 3D in those days that after it left the larger markets, they would start sending out single reels of the film, one side, A side or B side, to other theaters, and it was shown in 2D in most locations in the first few years after it was released.
But it's become such an iconic. You look at that robot, and you got a helmet and a gorilla suit, which clearly was it's hilarious on any number of levels, but it's become so iconic and so emblematic of the B science fiction movie. I'm sorry, A plus science fiction movies of the 1950s. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think you have to give primary credit to the Medved brothers who made it Robot Monster. They put it on their first list of golden turkeys back in the late 70s. And at that point, it began to develop a little following. I'm not real sure how many Robot Monster fans they were before then. But when that was released, it brought great shame upon me. You know.
Oh God, why?
Well, it's one thing to be remembered for an Academy Award nomination. It's an entirely different process to be remembered for being a featured player in one of the golden turkeys of all time. So I kind of hid out. I never did work after I was probably 13 or 14 when I did my last work in Hollywood. And I never returned to stage, screen, or television after that. And so as a grown-up, it was rarely brought up. Occasionally, someone in the family would remember it or whatever. They'd seen it on late night TV, where it lived for a number of years and still continues to live. Late night TV, you know, where 13 people in any given market at a time are watching the film. And but in the late 90s, I was managing a bowling center, and I ran a midnight squad of what they called red pin bowling, colored pin bowling. And there were 3 colored pins in every rack, and depending on where they were, they'd be worth various amounts of money. And It was right after the time they had installed automatic scorekeepers that had TV sets on every pair of lanes. And somebody comes running up to me while I'm calling the rainbow and said, "Is that you?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she pointed at the TV screens, and they were showing Robot Monster. And he'd seen the credits, and he saw my name, and he knew Greg. He knew Greg Moffett, not Gregory, but in any case, he said, "Is that you?" And I said, "Yeah, that's me." And the secret was out, at least in that city, and here in Bakersfield.
Oh, that's so funny.
And from then on, I became, well, still a little concerned about my name being tagged to the movie. But then I got invited to a couple of places to perform in movie memorabilia events, and eventually, Robot Monster was included among some of the films that I was invited for. The first event I ever did was at the Memphis Film Festival, and I was invited there for this, I believe it was the 70th anniversary of Superman being on the radio. And at the same time, they were celebrating the 75th anniversary of The Lone Ranger. And they had invited guests from both casts. And Jack was there from Superman. Actually, he was there by telephone. And a few other people. Noel was there, which was nice. And they, at late night, when it was a 4 or 5 day festival, late at night, they would show other films that the invited guests had been in, and they included Robot Monster.
Oh my God.
And there was probably, maybe 100 people in the room to watch the film. And the laughter was hysterical. I mean, they ripped it a new one. Well, it was not supposed to be a comedy, folks, you know.
Well, that makes it even better.
Well, ultimately, yeah. And the crowds that have seen it in the meantime, I know Bob had some great crowds in his summer tour last year in Wisconsin and New York, and he went a few other places. I was in Pittsburgh for the Monster Bash Festival late in the year, and maybe 300 people were in the audience, and they didn't stop asking questions in the Q&A after the film. They were fans.
Yeah, of course.
I was nonplussed.
It's really become redeemed, and in fact, I would like Bob to toot his horn a little bit because it just was announced a few days ago that for the first time, you've heard it here, probably not first, but you're hearing it now. Robot Monster has gone from worst to first
in the Rondo. Yeah.
And I would
Oh,
like
that's
Bob to talk about that.
fantastic.
Yes.
How proud you must be.
Well, thank you. It's been a labor of love for everyone on the team. And my history with the film goes back to about 1990. I was working in a film storage facility in New Jersey, of course, and I found a print of a movie called Monster from Mars. And being a young science fiction buff, I was interested because I'd never heard of it, and turned out to be one side of Robot Monster. Now, for a 3D film in the 1950s, it was photographed with two cameras, so you had a left side and a right side. And as Greg mentioned, the film had very, very few 3D playdates in 1953, so the prints were split up and separated.
Right.
And some of them were retitled. And this was the retitled Monster from Mars. Turned out to be a complete right side, 35 millimeter print. And a few days later, in another vault, also on a top shelf, coated with dust, was another Monster from Mars print that turned out to be a left side Robot Monster. So without even really trying, I had a left and a right side. And it was quite a fortunate find, because I came to find years later, as I did more research into the film and the elements, that this was the only complete 3D side of it. There was a company called Medallion Television that had some distribution to it, and they converted the original film to a red and blue called anaglyphic 3D, and whole sections of the film went flat. And for decades, even when the Medveds did their book, the assumption was, well, it went flat because it was such a cheap movie, they didn't shoot the whole thing in 3D. And of course, everybody believed that. And it looks like we have another guest on screen.
Harold just came in. Hello, Harold.
Hi, how you doing?
Thank you. Welcome. I'm David. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So I'll just wrap that up to say that it was a complete print. We screened it in New York. I was blown away how good the 3D was. For a 4-day shoot with a $16,000 budget, they did an outstanding job on the stereo cinematography. In fact, it's comparable, no exaggeration, to what the major studios were doing at the time, such as MGM and Paramount. So I realized that there was a lot to the film that wasn't being recognized. And it took many years, but we were able to finally do a full restoration, 4K digital restoration, and release the 3D Blu-ray in time for the 70th anniversary.
Wow.
And we're very proud of it because, like Paul mentioned, it went from the Golden Turkeys to the Rondo Awards. It won for Best Restoration and won for Best Blu-ray of the year, because there's way more than the movie on the disc. There's about 2.5 hours of bonus content, including a commentary track with Greg Moffett on it as well through the whole movie. So it's been very gratifying. And now this whole comic book graphic novel thing and the way this developed, and getting Paul involved and all the amazingly talented, creative writers and artists that he's brought on board, it's really wonderful to see. And we've got Harold, who's a great veteran with so much experience and expertise. And we've got Carl, who's been involved with comics practically his whole life, but this is going to be his first professional writing experience in the field. And that's pretty exciting.
Well, I want to introduce Harold to our audience. So Harold Buchholz is a writer-producer for the hilariously funny Mystery Science Theater 3000. And certainly this movie certainly qualifies for that sort of treatment.
Can I interrupt and tell him thank you for the treatment of Robot Monster?
Yes, so we brought up Carl. So Harold, I will get to you, but let's go to Carl. Carl, how'd you get involved in this, and tell us a little bit about your portion of this particular show?
Well, first I just want to say thank you so much, Paul and Bob, for having me on this project. It's been such a fun ride. I'm so happy that it got all the funding it needed, and I'm really looking to seeing all the stories that everyone produces. I remember it was Bob that told me about it. I think I was watching actually Robot Monster in his basement, like with the 3D glasses and everything. And I think it was once we were done, we went back up, and Bob told me, or he was telling me and my parents, I got the rights to this character. And I didn't really think, I can't remember if we had an actual plan at the time. We had a bunch of ideas. I don't really think we settled at a graphic novel just yet. There's definitely like the general idea of, hey, we can make stories with this. We can make our own stories. Mm-hmm. And so eventually it just evolved into a comic, and I was all for it. I was immediately all for it because I really love writing. I've been telling stories since before I could even hold a pencil, creating stories with my minifigures. And then at the start of last year, actually, I started writing just like as a hobby, and it just kind of evolved into this. And so when Bob asked me, hey, would you want to be a part of this project? I was immediately like, yes, I'm in, let's go. And it's been such a ride. It's been so much fun. I really love, I especially love the stories I've been working on. But I'm sure everyone else's stories are also equally as great, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the final product.
We're gonna do our best. Let's try to match up to you.
Fantastic. And Harold, tell me about your involvement with the project.
So I've known Paul for a number of years. We both worked at Archie Comics
Mm-hmm.
and worked on some projects together actually there. Paul predated me on the editorial side, and I was there on the business side years later, but I brought him in on some best of Archie events and that sort of a thing. And I've known Paul for years and years, and we call each other doppelgangers of ourselves because he was at Archie, I was at Archie. He's into classic comedy, B movies, silent films. And everywhere I would go, Paul seemed to have been a few steps ahead of me.
Don't forget
And
the
so
fit.
we even drive the same car. It's crazy. So when I got to know Joel Hodgson from Mystery Science Theater when I was working at Archie Comics, and that led me to helping him get the rights back to the show and basically bring it back in 2016 on Netflix. We got to do 3 seasons of that, and it was that time and that process that I got to write on a lot of Mystery Science Theater episodes kind of under Joel's tutelage. It was just amazing. And so when Paul told me about Bob's restoration of Robot Monster, I was all ears. I was very excited to hear about it. That, again, the Medved book, I had that growing up. It's just all those things kind of tie in together with each other. And so having seen the film and seen it, it's one of those strange movies that its budget is so small, but its reach is so great.
With the swiftness of a deadly cosmic ray, the Earth is invaded by indestructible moon monsters. Their ghastly mission, death for all humans.
It's attempting to be Shakespearean almost in its storytelling. It's dealing with post-apocalyptic messages. I mean, this heavy stuff is in there, but it's also this lighthearted story through the eyes of Johnny. And there's no other film like it. There's no other film with a gorilla with a diving helmet who's, I mean, when you think about that, it is one of the most iconic movie monsters in American history. And it was kind of born out of necessity, I'm guessing, given the resources that they had, but it was brilliant. And so when I heard that not only was this being restored, and Bob, as usual, did just an incredible job with it, and I heard that there's going to be a comic through Paul, I was really interested because it's very much what I'm all about. I mean, I did the Mystery Science Theater 3000 comic when it came out, which is actually the reason I got to know Joel in the first place, was to see if we could work on a comic together. It came full circle. We actually did do a Mystery Science Theater comic where we sent these characters, Crow and Tom Servo and Jonah, our new host, into these old 1940s, 50s, and 60s comic books. We drew them in and made them the main characters and riffed within the comics. And in 1996, inspired by Mystery Science Theater, I did a comic called Apathy Cat. It was a little anthropomorphic comic. And I sent those characters into like a 1956 public domain Robin Hood comic. God. This is just so much a part of who I am. When I was seeing this project, I was like, I also was a printing broker for comics. Helped get a lot of things printed, certainly for Archie and before that. So in so many ways, I thought, oh, this is something I actually could contribute to. And then when they said, hey, you want to riff on the movie and just kind of give it a fresh take using the actual 3D film frames from the film and kind of retell the story Mystery Science Theater style, I said, well, that would be absolutely amazing. It would be an honor to work on a film like this. I think Robot Monster was in season 1 of Mystery Science Theater 3000. Very few people have seen it because it was such an early season, but everything for me came together. And I said, this is absolutely a project I would be honored to be a part of, and to see what's going on with the Kickstarter and the love for this movie and the idea that finally Robot Monster, inspired by comics, gets to become his own comic, his own 3D comic. I think it's just so fitting. It's like, why hasn't this happened 70 years later? And for Greg to be involved with it, all those pieces have just come together to make an incredibly special project. And I hope the people that are listening to this, if they hear about it in time, that they will get a piece of this little bit of history, a comics history and film history, because you can, through the Kickstarter, you can get Bob's amazing Blu-ray and DVD as well. You can get Greg's signature in the books, and we have film cells. Is it original print, Bob?
Yeah, it was.
That you got some of the film 35 millimeter film frames, and all of those pieces coming together in this project. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity to be involved in such a classic film, and to honor it and at the same time have fun with it, which I think is kind of the spirit of what this movie was all about, is just amazing to me.
Harold,
Fantastic.
I must take a moment to apologize. I hollered at you earlier for being a part of the Mystery 3000 theater commentaries on Robot Monster, which apparently you weren't part of. So
No,
please,
not yet.
Please forgive my humble apology.
No. Well, you can get mad at me over what we put in the book, but I'm so looking forward to it. It's just amazing to be a part of this with such a talented crew of people. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity to be a part of something like this. So I'm very, very grateful to be a part of it. And I do encourage everyone to go to Kickstarter and check it out and make sure this is your chance to get a copy. So hopefully people will take advantage of that.
Yeah, and
I was just going to tell people to do that.
Yeah, if I may, it looks like what are we at? 8 days, 7 days. We actually funded, so we came on. This is almost like a victory lap.
Yeah.
We weren't expecting this to be a victory lap tonight, but we funded a couple nights ago, so we met the goal.
Okay, hold on a second. You never ever say that out loud.
All right.
Okay, you say no. We got stretch goals, or you say, we still need your help because we're gonna have, the printing costs are higher than we thought, and this is a great deal, and
I'm getting to that. See, my
and by the way, we have to fund a new lung for Greg, apparently.
Inflation, it's so high these days. You just never know where our budget is. It's just gonna keep going up and up and up.
It's gonna keep going up.
We have new news. Okay, so first of all, we're almost at we set it at 20. We're almost at 21 now. Okay, so that's mind blowing to start with. But we have new news. We have new news. We have two people that we're able to bring on because of how well this funding has gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk about them now. And Bob, I'm going to need your help because, of course, once you get on camera, you forget certain things. So Eric Kurland is this amazing 3D technician. He worked on the Simpsons 3D movie. He's done a bunch of things. And he also started a 3D museum. And that's where I need your help, Bob, because I forgot the name of the
3D space.
3D space. So
in Los Angeles, yeah.
He started this museum. And so this is going to blow everybody's mind. He's going to write a foreword that's about the making of Robot Monster and its travel from worst to first, as we said. But the foreword is going to be drawn out like a comic. So it's going to be a foreword in comic book form, and it's going to be drawn by Glenn Whitmore, a longtime DC and Archie artist. And that's new news. A nice little foreword from Eric. And also, we were able to get one of our fellow Archie alum, a very popular artist, Fernando Ruiz, who drew the Archie's Word Mysteries comics that I used to write. He's going to handle a nice little 2-page gag script that Owen Klein, the writer-director of Funny Pages, is writing. So these are two new pieces of news. And
wow.
There's actually a few people in our back pocket that we'd love to bring on if we can get just a little more funding. I'm working through all the page counts now and figuring that out. But people, you have until May 8th. You might possibly have more if Kickstarter decides to add a late pledge status to us. You never know. But
yeah, but don't count on it.
think of it as May. Think of it as May, and that's only until 11:59 on May 8th.
Okay.
So 11:59 p.m. So yeah, there's the Barnum
Eastern or Pacific?
I believe it's Eastern.
I think it's Eastern because of where we set it up in Eastern Zone. And yeah, 11:59 Pacific. So people, if you're interested in this, you're not going to be disappointed. It's in 3D. Did we mention that? It's in 3D, and that's like another cool aspect. I mean, I know we threw a whole bunch of reasons why you'd be interested in this, but 3D comics aren't all that common these days. And this is a nice hardcover graphic novel. And by the way, behind me, two other important things to mention. You see, there's two different cover variants. One of them is a brilliant pop art explosion by Mitch O'Connell. You can see, I got to go this way. You can see that there. And, he's a big Robot Monster fan. Him and his kid show up at conventions dressed as Roman from the film. And he's known for doing pinups of Robot Monster. So he jumped at this. And then the other cover is more photorealistic by a fellow named Jeff Slemons, who's painted a bunch of comic book covers and novel covers. And that one gets more into the whole kaiju aspect. We're going to have kaiju in this. We're going to have everything in this. We're going to have a very dramatic story for Carl. We're going to have funny stories. We have Harold Fumetti, which will be flashing up on the screen at some point. Yeah, there's just so much involved in this. And it's all really about, to play on what Greg was saying, it's all really about the what ifs. What may have happened before the events in the film, what may happen after the events of the film. And it's kind of playing with that concept that Greg mentioned too, where you don't really know. It kind of takes you by surprise, the film, because you don't know where the dream starts really. And you're really even not quite sure where it ends. So in a way, that's very influential. I mean, horror movies like Phantasm and Nightmare on Elm Street,
Right.
maybe those guys who directed those films were watching Robot Monster when they were kids, who knows? But yeah, so it's going to cover a lot of ground. And if you like this iconic character, you don't want to miss it.
Any plans for a Robot Monster new movie?
Not that I'm aware.
Very quiet.
I don't know about that, but 7 years ago, a fellow in Hollywood decided to do what he called Robot Monster the Musical during the fringe events in the summertime in Hollywood. He invited me down to show. The actor that played my role was a girl, tied down, of course, but but it was really interesting, and I got an overwhelming ovation from the crowd that was there that night. It was kind of mind blowing.
That's
People
great.
People get affection. I will tell you. I will show you something, which I talked to Paul about earlier, which is kind of when I was a young teenager, my first awareness of Robot Monster was in an issue of Fantastic Four. Somebody had sort of turned the world back into the 1950s, and this is who they were fighting at that time. So you can see that Robot Monster had quite the influence, certainly on Roy Thomas when he was that age, and John Buscema, the artist. So it's not the first time. And I know, Paul, you put Robot Monster into one of your
Fernando
comics.
Ruiz and I snuck Roman into at least one panel in Archie's Weird Mysteries at one point, just where we were kind of goofing on classic horror characters in film. And it's just iconic. I mean, how could it not be? I mean,
fantastic.
It seems so absurd. Clearly, it's a gorilla suit, and they stuck a diving helmet on it to differentiate it from just an everyday gorilla.
I love that. I love what you got up there, Bob. That's fantastic.
Well, there you go.
In the process, it became iconic. I mean, like Harold said, born out of necessity, and yet somehow it was like just visual gold.
It's genius, yeah.
Certainly ridiculously memorable. I love what you guys are doing. Is there anything we missed before we go? Because I think you've covered it all, and congratulations on raising the money on Kickstarter so far. I hope you go way farther, and I hope that if you're watching this right now and the deadline hasn't passed, go to Kickstarter. Are you guys going to be offering it for sale after the Kickstarter is over? And if so, can we give out a location where they can find it or where to look for it?
The nature of it is obviously Kickstarter. If you want to make sure you get a copy, particularly a signed copy, which I think is going to be very special, that's kind of its own limited thing. But we are going to reach out to some of the traditional comic shop distributors. Kind of what they order up front is going to be what's out there, and based on what we know, that may mean limited presence in stores. We certainly hope we'll get a lot of stores excited about it, because we think it's one of those books, once you see it, you got to have it. But if you want to have a copy of this book, now is the time to do it, if at all possible, through Kickstarter. It's going to be a little harder to find it, I think, once we go through the more traditional channels, because the nature of 3D, you're printing some specialty colors, right, with those glasses. And so it's not the easiest thing to set up a print run and go back and, do a bunch of extra copies like you would even a full color book these days through Amazon or whatever. It really requires effort to print it and print it right. And we are going to do our best to do that for this printing. But whether it goes back into another printing or you can get it another way, we certainly are going to make it available. But how fully accepted it is as a new publisher, it may be a little trickier to find once we're out there in the market.
So definitely, yeah, that echoes my thoughts exactly. If this interests you in the slightest bit, go to the Kickstarter. And I'll also say the other thing I want to say is that there's an amazing group of talents involved in this book. Charles Barnard is our 3D design director. It doesn't happen without him. But there's a list of writers and artists who we've tapped for this that we can't even name. It's so big, and there are people from all over. And that's the beauty of this project. It's like the first and the last, right? So it's the first published comic book fiction from Carl, and it also features the input and story ideas of the last surviving cast member of the film. It's a true alpha omega product, and but you have to go to the Kickstarter just to see who's involved. The cast list of creators on this, and it's everybody. It's people who've worked for the publishers, like DC Archie, Dark Horse, etc. But it's also people who've worked for noted independent publishers, and it's people who are up and comers. In addition to Carl, we have a young lady named Marley Starr on this, and we have people of all age groups, all genders, all nationalities. I mean, it's truly like it's the United Nations of Robot Monster graphic novels. So, I mean, you're not going to believe me. This is really, Harold said it's a once-in-a-lifetime project, and the scope of it is just hitting me now, really thinking about it, because my brain has been just about, are we going to make our number, for the past few weeks. And now it's like, wow, this is some project. So people, please go to the Kickstarter. If nothing else, just out of curiosity, read about it. But what we hope you'll also want to contribute as well, if you can, and get a nice book for yourself that you'll enjoy.
Paul, Greg, Harold, Carl, Bob, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that this thing doubles before this is over. And congratulations. I can't wait to see it. And we will see you next time on Pop Goes the Culture. So thanks for joining in. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to share it. Don't forget to buy the Kickstarter. Buy two. Buy one for a friend, because, they're going fast. So see you next time.